So even more than what they have now. So to I guess answer the question of, well, there's a ton of credit being created now. Why aren't we seeing, the top of the market? Couldn't this be the top of the market?
The earnings figures don't suggest that would happen yet.
The bank earning figures.
Well, let me give you an example. I don't always know about Australia, but one of the investments I have in the UK, I've just remortgaged. I can have what is it? It's a 2-bed, 1 reception flat, terraced. I can collect £1,100 a month rent. My mortgage is costing me £400. House property price is going to collapse when you can do that. So the earnings is way above what it's costing me.
So that's part of your economic rent, because that was a difficult difficult point for me to understand when I first came in. I'm like, what do you mean by economic rent? It's basically how much does that land produce?
Yes. Now it's got a house on it.
Yeah.
The land is not the house. You can divide the difference between the house and the land, but I wouldn't get hung up on that too much. Just treat it today as one and the same. It isn't from a strict economic viewpoint, but from an accounting point, it is. If you can buy a house and you can get £1,000 a month rent for it, and you can pay back the bank £400 or £450, or if it's not an interest only loan, it's going to be £700 or £800. Isn't that a no-brainer to be doing? That's what everybody does.
So basically, until it gets above that and then into heavily negative gearing, I don't know if that's a term over in the UK, but obviously here in Oz, that's when stuff starts to go wrong, because you're then having
start to happen by interest rates rising, or house prices coming down a little bit, or not going anywhere to cover an interest payment, and you have to then have a situation where you've got a lot of borrowers being pressured by interest rates rather than still owning the house outright. So we're not anywhere near there yet. We've got another half a decade to go yet before anything starts to happen like that.
I can't believe that, half a decade, even into 2026. All right.
We've seen nothing yet.
We've seen nothing. What?
Go back. Remember, look, I can remember late 1980s, 86, 87, 88, 89, when the stock market crashed in 87, absolutely everybody started buying property because they just couldn't stand the emotion of the stock market anymore. 2005, 2006, 2007, do you remember when Paris Hilton was cavorting around and everybody was focused on her glasses?
It's all on TV. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, and we were borrowing as much as we could. And, you go to the Newcastle Bank in England and the bank would give you 125% of what the house was worth, right? So you could get an extra 25% just for walking in the door. We'll see what happens next, but I think these things haven't happened yet, so we'll see.
That's something to add in at the end of the convo. Well, yeah, I had some other points like, what are things that we should look out for and how do we use this info? But going on with more of the questions, because it's in everyone's mind now with the interest rate hikes in the US, everyone says the interest rate's about to go up, therefore that should crash the market right now.
They are about
crash
to
it. Yeah.
But we need to differentiate for the reason why they're going up. They've got to normalise. They're too low. So they have to normalise, and that's what they'll do over the next year or so.
But won't that crash the market? No more money printing. That's all that's pushed the market up so far.
And it will affect the stock market, but it won't affect what property speculators are doing yet, because a lot of the loans will be fixed. They'll be fixed 3, 4, 5 years, so an increase in interest rates won't affect things for another 4 or 5 years. Mortgages won't go up that much directly. The Fed will lift its rate. It won't directly affect earnings immediately of what real estate's doing, and it's.
But you think it'll take 5 years for it to affect it?
Interest rates are just going to normalise, right? So they'll just go up a little bit. And now
what's a little bit?
2%, 1.5%,
So
2%. And
one and a half.
but remember, no, whilst we,
Yeah.
once they go up, we've got inflation happening at the moment. Now, if there are corporations listed on all the stock markets, if they have pricing power, and if they can increase the prices of the products, which many can, their earnings will outstrip the cost of interest rate rises. Now, if the earnings of the corporations continue to go up more than what the cost of the money is, share prices must go up to reflect that. It's all about earnings. It's what it does to earnings. There'll be some companies, though, that might struggle a little bit with higher interest rates. If the higher interest rates for those companies affect their earnings and earnings decrease for those companies, then those share prices will decline. And that's precisely what's happening in the stock market at the moment. Corporations, mainly tech stocks, that have future forward earnings, when interest rates are higher, those earnings have to be capitalised at a higher rate, which means effectively a higher discount value, which is going to lower the value of the forward earnings. So tech companies and companies that don't have cash earnings, their share prices are going to come down, right? And that's been happening. It started already because the market knows this well in advance, right? But banks and some other corporations that are likely to make higher earnings as interest rates go up, the differential, their earnings will rise, their share prices will go up. You can see that happening in Australia, right? National Australia Bank yesterday was in the 52-week new highs list. Stock markets are not going to collapse when the banks are in a 52-week new highs list, right? So it's all about earnings. So stop.
Yeah, I can hear the frustration.
Stop looking at other people's opinions. You should not be looking at an economist or a stock market person's opinions if they don't understand economic rent and they don't factor in land into their calculations. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, their forecasts and their prophecies and their prognostications are just going to confuse you. Earnings, study earnings.
Even some of the biggest property investors who have made their name for themselves, say Robert Kiyosaki, I love his books,
Yes.
but still forecasting collapses in 2020.
Yes.
I thought they would have some more. What stunned me is why people don't have more of a grasp of a cycle, not a 7 to 10 year cycle, just an overall bigger cycle than that.
I tell you, but this is not going to sound very pleasant. Guys like Kiyosaki and others, look, they're not dumb. They're smart fellas, right? And
Totally.
I wouldn't denigrate them at all. But let me just say generically, and this goes for just about all real estate people that I've met. They're too smart. So they'll buy property and it keeps going up, right? So they start to get a belief in themselves that they're really smart people, yes? But the real estate sector and land prices, because they go up so often for 14 years and only spend a year or two coming down whenever they do come down, the real estate investors, those guys, mostly guys, they start to believe that they're smarter than the market until one day they just get too overconfident. Real estate people also, when you own a couple of houses, it's really easy to just keep putting the rent up a little bit every time you've got a bit of an expense. And if you've got a tight market, like in some areas in Australia, Melbourne and others, or in some of the mining towns at the moment, just keep putting the rent up. What's the problem? Just do it, right? So you don't have to be highly intelligent to. Actually, no. Let me put it another way. You don't have to be. People who can do that don't spend their time studying markets to educate themselves.
I guess you could become complacent in your own.
Yes.
Yeah. In your own success.
Let me put it another way. Property markets cover up your mistakes mostly.
Yeah.
And so Kiyosaki and all those other guys, they can cover them like that. Yes. And also, might I say again, it does come back to the whole corruption of economics. A very thorough job was done on economics institutions, and let's face it, the big guys in the late 1900s or so, Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and all those others, they had, by today's standards, they had hundreds of billions of dollars at their leisure. They owned the universities. In fact, some of those guys created the universities, or they left their endowments to the universities.
Again, this is not conspiracy theorist.
Well, no, they're just acting in their own interest. many American universities are very large landowners. So they're not going to teach about land economics.
All right. I had a question on that too, so that kind of answers that. But finishing up on the last question about interest rate hikes, what happens if the RBA or the Fed raises rates? Well, to where we are now, 1.5%, 2% is probably not going to make too much of a difference.
No, it won't.
That could take...
Well, let me say, it'll depend on what sort of business you're in. If you're in a business that's directly affected by what you've lent, and it does lift your bottom line, your cost of money, and if you can't pass that on to the consumer or to the buyers of your products, that will reduce your earnings. So if you're listed, then earnings decline, share price must decline as well. But generally, though, at the moment, there won't be any problem in those things being passed on by corporations.
And so what we could see is tech coming down now, and then banking, developers, land. And so that's going to confuse a lot of investors, which I'm already seeing. They're saying, well, the market's collapsing. Well, no, tech is collapsing, but this other side is going up. But no one's interested in looking at banks, especially in my industry of crypto. And it's just not fun. It's not exciting.
No, I understand. It's slow, right? But,
boring. Banks. They're dying. It's a dying industry, that sort of thing.
Fast, slowly. Okay. I think you've seen you're right. You've seen Akhil Patel's work, my co-director.
Yeah, I had Akhil on the channel as well. Did a video with him.
He may well have shown you that in the second half of the cycle, the real estate and banking stocks outperform, and tech stocks underperform. Doesn't mean tech stocks can't go up; they just underperform relative to banking.
So you're saying the banks are going to do better than something like Tesla in this second half?
Yes.
Wow. That's going to be the title of the video.
Now,
Tesla underperform.
Yes. Now, don't get me wrong here. We're talking share price performance. Okay. We're talking return on the market. Tesla is a great company. They're going to produce lots of electric cars, and they'll sell, and they'll do very, very well. Yeah. So I don't want to say that
we're talking the stock price only.
Yeah. Yes. We're talking where the earnings are affected. Yes. And Tesla may still go up, but relative to the banks, I think they'll underperform. History suggests that in the second half of the real estate cycle, tech stocks underperform relative to the fire, insurance, and real estate sectors in the United States.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, what was tech like? I don't think of it being 30, my 30s. The decades previously, tech was, what was it? Electricity, grids, railroads. Like, we don't think of that as technology anymore.
No.
But that was the previous cycles.
Well, yes, and so we're only talking since the NASDAQ was founded. We're talking since about 1971. Okay, so we've only got we've looked at three prior cycles as a definition of tech stocks.
Oh, okay, not technology back in the early 1900s of real estate.
NASDAQ.
Okay, all right, good to know. I was always thinking of the technology back then too, but good to know. I'm learning here. How do you see the internet impacting this cycle? Was another question. First cycle, the internet has been a part of from the beginning. Would this be the first cycle the internet has been here from the beginning?
Well, I was there in the beginning, 1995. When Mark Andreessen invented Netscape, and then Mr. Bill Gates bought him out, took him over, and then decided to give it away free with Microsoft.
You got one of the first emails, I think.
I did. I go back now, and it's probably one of my bigger regrets. I used to have my email address on the bottom right-hand corner of my business card. This was in 1994, right? I go around to businesses telling them that I had my own business forecasting, but they weren't interested in the forecast. They wanted to know what was on the bottom right-hand corner of my business card. What's this? Fill that, right? Never seen this before.
Yeah.
And of course, other people cottoned onto it, and we had our first internet service and email corporations created so you could get online and everything else. That really drove the American market after 1994. It pushed the American market into all-time new highs. It fed the market, and up we went. It did the same. It did the very same after 2008. And I've said this many times as well. If you can learn to read a chart, if you can learn what stock market's all about, you would have known, the stock market told you in March of 2009, the stock market told you that the NASDAQ was now the leader of the American market. And you could have known that at the time because in March 6, 2009, the NASDAQ made a higher bottom than what it did in October of 2008. It was the only index that did that. That's a bit of Gann chart reading. It told you that the American internet stocks were going to be very strong, just from a simple reading of the market, because investors were not allowing the price of those stocks to decline very far. They were buying up at higher prices. And that told you that they thought those stocks were still strong and had a good forward outlook. And right.
That's something that myself and Michael on our channels talk to people about when it comes to, say, cryptocurrencies, because you're looking for the leaders and who are the stronger horses in such a fast speculative market. You're like, well, this one's bottoming higher when everything else is going lower. It's telling you something.
Reverse. It's the reverse now. The NASDAQ topped out in late 2021. The Dow had its top on January 5, 2022. NASDAQ still leading. Peaked first. It had a lower top when the Dow had a higher top. The NASDAQ now is looking weaker as the weaker market for the next year or two.
Would you say that for cryptocurrency as well, since it sort of peaked?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not going to have those bigger gains into this stage of the cycle?
Probably not. Not yet. Okay. After
Not yet.
2022, we need to get through 2022 first. 2022, in my opinion, will be a difficult year for the stock market. Not for real estate. Real estate will be a good year still, but it'll be a difficult year for stock markets.
And probably cryptocurrency then?
Probably crypto as well, yes.
Yeah, and we might see some higher lows later this year, maybe lower lows. We don't know yet. I guess we got to. All right, we'll get onto crypto later. But so the internet, it's not really going to impact this cycle any more than what it has in the previous cycle.
No, same.
More volatility.
Same, just the same. It's just going to, very thing again. Anybody that creates anything new with the net, they'll float, they'll list. Very productive. Very productive. It's good.
It's not going to affect the cycle though, because of how fast information is flowing. No. I demonstrated the book. There was when the 1873 downturn took place, the people blamed the downturn on the telegraph, because they said the telegraph was now disseminating information so fast people couldn't cope with the speed of the information transfer. You need to post that one on Twitter and tag people talking about the internet. So that's 150 years old, and people we're repeating what we just said 150 years ago.
Absolutely.
The technology. After the property cycle peak, is the correction forecasted to bring land, they say house prices, but land prices lower than what they currently are? That's obviously a bit broad because of all the different locations, but people trying to figure out
History suggests that residential prices come down by about 30%, roughly.
From the peak. We don't know where that is yet.
Yeah, no, we don't know where that is yet. From the peak. Industrial stocks, commercial stocks, they can often come down by half. And depending on where the most speculation takes place, there are areas that can collapse entirely. So to give you an example on that, in the 1990s, the early 1990s, Texas on the I-90 saw the biggest speculation. That was around Dallas, I think. Basically, they had hundreds of see-through buildings, right? Prices collapsed in some places down to zero for some commercial buildings, simply could not be gotten rid of. There was so much speculation taking place. Out in Denver, there was a lot of speculation taking place there. The plats, the subdivisions of all the land, they call it platting in the US, I think. The outer subdivisions just collapsed completely. Some of those things just couldn't be sold. They built 10 or 20 years in advance. El Paso was another area in the early 1990s. They built so far out, they platted land so far out that the real outskirts became utterly worthless.
And that will affect through to the next stage of the cycle. Because if you have that much, and we're saying, all right, here's the bottom, and things going up, and like, well, my town isn't going up. It's possible that it's just way too much oversupply.
Yes, and it takes 10 years to digest that. I went back.
So they might even miss out on a whole cycle altogether. Some of these places, if cycle, it crashes.
Certainly the first half of the cycle.
First half. Okay.
Yeah, usually it depends, and again, it won't recover unless they get better population growth coming back. And so usually what happens 6 or 7 years into the new cycle, a new governor comes in and he decides he wants to do something productive for the big city. So he says, all right, well, let's give away some land, or let's have some attractive tax bases so we can attract more people to the whole county or the whole area, and that generally gets things kicked off. San Francisco didn't have that problem because it's hemmed in on several sides by water. New York, the same issue. So you get a very quick downturn, but then a very quick recovery because you didn't have that.
It's landlocked.
Yeah, that's right. It's landlocked.
Oh, not landlocked. Sorry. Yeah, blocked by. There's nowhere to go. That's right. A good point. Looking at where you are, if you're trying to use this information, like I'm on the Gold Coast, so you got nowhere to go. It's the water or the mountains on the other side, and you don't really want to go up onto the mountains because there's no infrastructure up there.
Yes. Yeah, so what the idea is, you understand the real estate cycle. That gives you the structure of the economy, and then after that you have to apply that. With some emotional and logical intelligence to the region where you live. Yes, and so if you live in a place that can expand forever, well, it's the last to collapse and the last to recover.
All right. What signals or signal warnings that you see to call the end of the cycle or tell you that the end of the cycle is near?
Oh, that's very easy. Nobody ever notices. First up, there'll be a poster girl or a poster boy comes up in the next couple of years that talks up the cycle. I don't know, maybe it's Mr. Trump if he gets back into the White House in 2024.
You think that's a possibility? Are all the Trump fans going to get excited?
Things are so stupid at the moment with all this government posturing with Ukraine. It's just my opinion, my humble opinion, that I think the US is creating so much difficulty with the Ukraine and Russia on the border at the moment because they don't want China to hog all the limelight with the Winter Olympics. Things are so crazy. It would not surprise me if in a week or two's time, Mr. Trump gets up and says, I can fix this problem in the Ukraine. I'm going to talk to Mr. Putin. I'm going to ask Mr. Putin to take his troops back to Moscow. If that happens, Trump will be hailed as a peacemaker. Somebody else will put him up for a second time for a
election or something.
No, he'll be put up again for the Nobel Prize, for the Nobel Peace Prize. They'll all hail him as a peacemaker. This will be great for his run after 2022. Things are insane at the moment at a government level, right? So it just wouldn't surprise me with that sort of stuff. So there's going to be a poster boy come up or poster girl as we go into 2026. So watch for that. That will take everybody's attention away from what they should be looking at. Yes, so that's the first thing to look for.
All right.
It's starting to get carried away with their own abilities, right? Which is sure to happen again. It'll be another.
It's not really an objective way to understand an end of a cycle. I did that with.
It only happens if you go into the extreme, right? So that's the first thing to be looking for. It isn't that objective, and you can't say it's not scientific and it's not economic.
You went to university to tell me that.
It's people's behaviour. So behaviour is likely to become a little bit more hedonistic as we go into the extreme.
That's what I heard of economics. Study of the human behaviour or how we interact with the business.
Yeah, but to bring it into something a bit more less like that, a bit more realistic, you have to watch for the yield curve, which is the Fed rate versus the 10-year yield in the US, the long bond. You just watch the behaviour there. You'll be looking a year out, 6 months out. You'll be looking for a crossover where it does matter how high interest rates go. The short the short.
Didn't we just have that now as well? Like, you know,
No,
whatever it was, a year or two ago?
The curve is flattening. Yes, we did in 2019. Yes, it happened briefly. Nobody saw it.
I heard it all the time. It's got to crash. The yield curve got to crash.
Yeah. So you watch what the yield curve's doing, and if you don't know what that is, you need to study it. I put that up on my site for my members and stuff. We go through all that. It teaches you. That's pretty simple once you get it. You just got to watch for where the tallest buildings go. But
and their date of completion.
Date of complete. Well, yes, their date of completion is one to watch, but you should also look out for some sort of announcement, 2025, 2026, where some very rich person decides that they want to build the biggest, grandest, most incredibly unbelievable structure. So you could watch out for that. I'm not sure we'll get the tallest anymore. The Chinese government have done what I think is a very positive thing. They've forbidden the building of tall buildings now. It's a very productive thing to do. Speculators don't like it, but it's long overdue. It's just getting stupid what was happening in China with how quickly and how high you can build things. Overbuilding, really. Chinese have stopped that, so it might not be the world's tallest anymore, but it'll be the biggest, grandest. I don't know. President Trump.
What was it last cycle? Just as a bit of an example for someone who hasn't been around.
The Burj Khalifa, and that was
Middle East.
In the Middle East, that was announced. I said to people when that was announced and started building it would open in a recession, which it did. The Middle East, they also announced, you might remember, the building of those, the Palm Jumeirah, was that what it was called?
That was the land that looks like all palms in the ocean or the sea there.
They built that into the sea, some astronomical price.
And the world, I know that's half sunk. They put all the map of the world in the sea.
Yeah. So there might be some sort of announcement like that comes through. I suspect though that it'll be something a bit more less obvious now. It might be something in the crypto field. There might be some particular invention, or there might be some expansion in the crypto field. Somebody might come along and say, well, we can sell bits of houses, and we can use the architecture of what's been done with blockchain to say, well, prices have gone so high in some places in the US, people can't afford it. We might say that you can now own 1/6 of a house with the blockchain and start selling off 6ths and other things like that. That announcement might push things right over the top. Something speculative it'll be. I don't know. President Trump, then, if he's back in, he might announce Trump Tower on the moon. I don't know.
Now we're just getting out there. I keep wanting to come back. I'm trying to put myself in the position of someone who still believes the cycle has to come to an end this year. We'll probably see a recession this year. Is that likely? No. Unlikely?
No, unlikely. No.
A technical recession?
No, unlikely. No.
Bear market?
If we're talking stocks, you could see.
Yes.
We could see a bear market in stocks. Yes, that's.
So technically, a bear market is 20% drop from the all-time high. Was it in a particular period? I don't remember.
Well, as you know, Jason, every year I do a roadmap for people.
Yes.
For all the members, that's based on how time works. They've been pretty good the last.
They have been.
15 years I've been doing them. We used the roadmap to forecast the top at the end of 2019, very early 2020. The roadmap for 2022 in the stocks, US stocks, is telling us that markets are likely to go lower after March into June. So yes, I think that the Nasdaq
June, July, August, something around around third quarter, maybe a lower low than we just saw, maybe a higher low. Not sure yet.
A retrace of what we moved up from March 2020 up to last month's tops. It'll be a retrace, a third, a half, something like that. Nothing serious.
Right.
It's just markets go up, they go down. Markets can't go higher without retracing first. I wouldn't be able to.
So no recession in 2022. That's pretty clear.
Yeah,
That's 2/4 of negative growth.
Yes, unlikely.
Yeah.
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely. All right.
Yep.
I've got questions about property, but I wanted to. Hyperinflation is always a big one, and I need to leave that one for a bit later. But what the hell? Hyperinflation, inflation. We have inflation, 7.5%. It's thrown out all the time about hyperinflation.
The US government and the Fed, they're not that stupid. They're just they never print so much to get hyperinflation. It's just not
going to happen.
No.
What about when the market crashes after 2026? Are we going to print even more, 10 times the amount of money to make us survive?
Well, you could, but at that particular time, because there's so much credit being decreated with the deflation of land prices, you could print as much as you want. If people don't go out and spend it because they think prices will be lower tomorrow than they are today, there's no way people spend money or buy houses. If people think houses are declining and that next month houses will be cheaper than this month, they stop buying. That's deflationary. It's not inflationary, and it's certainly not hyperinflation.
So no possibility of hyperinflation either?
No. You could get it places, Turkey, Zimbabwe.
Not the US's, not the Australias, the Canadas, the UK's.
No. The Fed's just not that stupid. They're bright guys. They don't understand the cycle much, but they know what money's all about.
All right, so no recession in 2022, no hyperinflation after 2026. We could have the biggest boom and massive collapse in the world. Yeah. Can't see the hyperinflation happening.
No.
We'll have the biggest collapse ever.
It depends on what side of the market you're on. If you're into 2026 and there'll be people then that getting onto the property ladder because they'll be told it's a great time to be buying. They'll buy in. People who buy their first house and they're absolutely mortgaged to the hilt. For them, it's going to be a depression when house prices come down. For some banks that have lent too much money to the wrong people, it'll be a depression for them too. But if you've going into 2026, if you've remained reasonably conservative, if you're
not leveraged up too much,
if you're not leveraged too much, if you've got decent tenants and you don't owe significant amounts on all your properties, and you're cashed up and you're okay and you've organised things with your bank, it might be the best time in history.
So what I'm hearing now is no recession this year. This could be another fantastic opportunity to be investing again, to make use of this second stage of the cycle. Yes. But as we approach the end of the cycle, not to be over leveraged and just to remain as cool as possible, but things will get absolutely crazy.
Yes.
How can property prices continue to increase like they have done already? How do people continue to afford to buy? We always think they're overvalued now. Everything is like $1 million here in Australia. What suburb's not $1 million?
Well, you move to areas where you can afford, and if that means you can work.
Where does all this money keep coming from? Yeah.
Well, if you're in, have you heard of a place called Quilpie? I hear they're giving land for free at the moment.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, okay, probably a couple of 100 miles from where you are, right? It's inland. I don't know what they do in there, but the town council in Quilpie, I've heard they're giving land away for free, for nothing. So you just have to live there for 6 months.
I think you got to build on it and spend over $700,000. Well, that's a different place I was looking at. You had to build a property on it.
Okay, well, if you can work from home completely, and you've got a great idea for an investment or whatever else it is, or you're working, take your family and move there if you wanted to. If prices get too high in town.
So these sort of questions are a bit. I don't want to. They're not stupid. Definitely not stupid. But it's kind of hard for the average person to understand, how do these prices keep going up into this next stage of the market? If the interest rates are coming up, their prices are already too high. Where's this money coming from?
Well, it's just look.
Who is buying the real estate?
Just look at what happened in prior cycles, right? First up, I hate to say this for people listening in Australia, but sweet FA happens in Australia, right? From my perspective in Jakarta, when I stay in the UK or the US, Australia just doesn't get on the pages. Yes, except for perhaps when a kangaroo comes into town or somebody.
Well, there's a fire.
Or there's major drama. So it really doesn't matter what happens in Australia. It's what's happening in the US that you have to worry about. And prices just haven't gone high enough. There's just plenty of opportunity.
So people could still afford properties over there. I guess they can just move to other towns. There's so many of them.
Americans are very mobile. They can move anywhere with their jobs. Texas is raging. It's not overly expensive. Parts of California are probably expensive, but there'll be some places that are. They come down a little bit, but generally, from what I'm hearing, it's not desperate over there yet. When it does get a little bit desperate, the politicians start feeling the heat. So they start thinking to themselves, wow, if my constituents are complaining because the houses are too expensive, they start dreaming up ways to assist them. And so governments will introduce first homeowner grant again, which they think helps first homeowner buyers. But as soon as the grant is introduced, as you know, if you understand the real estate cycle, if you understand the realization of the rent, the land price just simply goes up as soon as the grant is introduced, right? They think they're helping because people get 25 grand or whatever it is straight into their pocket, but it doesn't. In the long run, it pushes up prices more. Those sort of things are going to happen towards the end of the cycle. Yes, and so
that's another signal. Then we haven't seen too much of that yet, and they do it around the world. Just call it some other sort of scheme.
Yeah, you can also you could get a state government comes in and they're thinking that house prices are unaffordable. So mistakenly, and usually it's it doesn't matter, Liberal or Labor, it doesn't matter. Some treasurer, some bright spark comes up and says, well, we need to make land prices affordable. We're going to abolish the pre-existing land tax. Now, if you happen to know, again, your law of economic rent, as soon as you abolish any existing land taxes, land price will go up by what the tax is withdrawn. And so, as we start to reach the extreme and house prices do start to get into the areas where people really start complaining, governments take action. And I can tell you 100% sure the action that the government takes will be wrong, it will be incorrect, and it will lead to even higher land prices, aka house prices. This is going to happen, absolutely as sure as eggs, because politicians want to get re-elected. Sometimes the politicians even know what they're introducing is wrong because the Treasury Department will tell them that if you get rid of the land tax, land prices will go up. But the politicians know that the average Joe and Jane, they don't get it, right? They don't know things. So they'll believe what they're being told. Wow, that's fantastic. My land tax is going to come down now. Means I can pay more. Means I'm saving more money. I can go out and I'm getting a good deal from the government, and I'll re-elect this guy because I think he's doing me good, right? That is going to happen. I don't know what sort of things government might dream up, but they'll certainly dream up something in the belief that they're helping people make their house more affordable to buy. Yes.
All right. Breaking the cycle and the economy in 2022. We've covered that a fair bit, but I'm looking at different ideas, questions of how the cycle could break. I'm sure we could get through a few of these. The first one is around the 18.6-year cycle. I think they're assuming that the cycle is more widely known now. Do you see it will break? So let's assume that a lot more people know about it. Will the cycle break at that point?
Do
you see it dissolving? Like, do you see the cycle dissolving as more awareness grows from it? We kind of, the other powers don't want it to happen.
I don't know, just because you all of a sudden become aware of it, you think everybody else does too.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I've had this before. I was asked that in 2005 and 2004. So people have been explaining for a bit. If you tell too many people, the cycle's not going to happen. Well, I said, can't see it. Can't see it.
We're basically taking on, if what you're saying is correct, the Rothschilds, the governments, everyone that has their vested interest in the economic system taught in universities. They don't want the the economic rent to be known about it, and they don't want to tax the land. And even if they were happy for everyone to know, I guess like you said, the average Joe and Jane don't want their land taxed. They don't want their home.
the understanding level, I think now has become even likely is and will become even worse. We're all on our phone.
What about with the distrust of the government? Is that growing, or is that just young people?
That just allows people to believe crap. I mean,
what, the distrust?
So people believe all sorts of wild and woolly conspiracy theories. Look what Trump was able to do, and so people start to act on that sort of stuff, and they don't begin to understand the really important stuff, right? And so not only that, the situation's worse now, I think, because we're all on I'm losing my words. What's the new phenomenon that everybody's on? You see young kids.
Cryptocurrency?
No.
TikTok.
TikTok. We're all on TikTok. Right? So any loose few seconds that we get these days, you just open your app and you start looking at TikTok, right?
Right. So your attention is just getting drawn elsewhere, and there's no benefit in just keeping your attention on something else that's going to benefit you.
Nobody's learning. Nobody's studying and learning anymore what they should be learning. We all think we're smart and trying to follow.
But are you just an old codger that just thinks the world's getting worse? What is this talk, Phil?
I don't know. Maybe I'm becoming more of a grumpy old man. But what I'm saying is, whilst we're so busy, I'm doing this too. Whilst we're so busy, days gone past it was Facebook. People are over Facebook now. We're now looking at all the TikTok stuff. It's diverting our attention. Yes. Mm-hmm. So if you don't start worrying that too many people are going to know this, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Not at least in our lifetimes. There's a lot of barriers to overcome. Not in anyone's lifetimes.
There's just so much. There's just so much activity and stuff going on now that can take our attention away from what we really should be doing if you really want to understand the cycle. Yeah.
Cycle, can it end earlier?
Hello, it's Cathy Stacey here again. I trust that you've enjoyed watching part 2 of this interview with Phil Anderson and Jason Pizzino. Are you starting to get the idea now that a recession is impossible in 2022? Now, before we go to part 3, there's just a couple of things I wanted to mention to you. Now, Phil talked about the roadmap. And every year, us at PSC, we put together a stock market roadmap, an economic roadmap for the year. Now, this roadmap, it's been quite prescient over the years, but it is exclusively available to Property Share Market Economics members only. Now, there is a link in the description below to become a member of PSE. And once you do that, you'll have access not only to this year's roadmap, you'll also have access to our 10-year Dow Jones forecast and our pattern of the decade report. They're amazing reports. And of course, there's many other things that you have access to as well. Please do go to the description below to get the link. We also have an invitation to you to join our free weekly newsletter. We promise you that we will send you every week in your inbox a newsletter where we commentate on what's occurring globally and we relate it back to the 18.6-year cycle. We do not make forecasts in this particular free newsletter. You'll need to become a PSC member for our forecasts. But as a start, please do join our free list. Now, lastly, if you click here, you can access part 3. All you need to do is click here on the screen, or if you click here on the screen, you can access other videos from the PSC team.